Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Ti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvise Sasundivadi Paschachita Satarine. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Okay. I think we're just going to start. I have to get up the document we're reading. I have to find it. So give me a moment. I was working on other things this morning, so I'm a little delayed. Mam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvise Sasandivadi Paschati Satarine. Mukam Karati Vachalam Pangurangayate Kirimya Krapa Tamaham Bande Siguru Dinatarinam. Vanchakapatarubhyascha kripasindubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. So Chaitanya Dasi, do you know where we left off? You disciples are all intelligent. That's where we start? Okay. Well, I don't find that on my document. Maybe we have a different document. I have to do better than that. It's not coming up in my word search. Let me look in the chat, see what it says here. Concluding words. Oh. This is under the concluding words of CC. Okay. Okay. You disciples are all intelligent and experienced men. You can go on managing this movement. If I depart, there's no cause for lamentation. I will always be with you through my books and my orders. I will always remain with you in that way. So the challenge that we face is realizing what Prabhupada is saying here. It's, of course, we can hear it. It's one thing to hear it. And we say that Prabhupada has never left. We're like, okay, sounds good, right? Prabhupada never left. You like that? And you're all thinking, well, I never met him. And I say, but he never left. So what's your problem? And you all have met him. And of course, a reality that we all have to accept is that when you meet someone and you become attached to them, as you do with your guru, then obviously when they're not there, then you lament. But if you never met them, the only reason you're lamenting is because you met them. So what's better, not having met them or meeting them and lamenting? Like, of course. So when someone departs, you can also celebrate the fact that you got to meet them, because so many people who didn't get to meet them will be jealous of you, right? Oh, you got to meet so-and-so, Maharaj. I'm jealous, right? And you're lamenting and they're jealous of you. So like makes sense out of all of that, right? You're lamenting, they're jealous. So someone has left, you remember them, and sometimes you remember them and you laugh. Sometimes you remember them and you cry, right? But the fact is you can remember them. So that's a great blessing, right? That you had their association. And of course, if it's a devotee, you got their inspiration. So that's important. And Prabhupada constantly tried to teach us that the most important thing about the spiritual master is what he teaches. Like I believe it was Chanaka Pandit said, you don't know who a fool is until they open their mouth. You know, and you can make someone made a sarcastic remark like, don't open your mouth and prove what I'm thinking, that you're an idiot. You know, don't embarrass yourself like that, you know, because once you speak, then it will be revealed. Your level of consciousness will be revealed. So Prabhupada didn't want us to only identify with the spiritual master on the physical level. He wanted us to understand that the real blessing of the Guru is the Guru's words. Now, we could say, but without his living example, his words won't have power. And that's true to some degree. That's for sure. And so we need both, but we're not, like we said on Monday, we're not undermining the importance of physical association. But Prabhupada wanted us to understand that the words were more important. And I think I gave this example how several times I think I gave this, not example, but history, about sometimes a devotee does really well in the presence of their spiritual master. And they don't do well if they're not in their presence. But if someone does well through the instructions of the Guru, then they'll always do well, in his presence or not. It won't matter. They'll always, obviously in the presence, they'll be more inspired. But as we said, you can't always be in the presence. And how long does inspiration last? We're doing a workshop this weekend, and the workshop is, it's a workshop, basically it's entitled Inspiration, How to Inspire Devotees in Christian Consciousness. And I was looking up the definition of inspiration and enthusiasm to distinguish. I don't know if I discussed this with you, but you can be inspired and not enthusiastic, although that doesn't sound correct, but you can be inspired, but that inspiration doesn't manifest in anything tangible. So you can be inspired by your spiritual master, inspired by his Sangha, inspired by his classes, inspired by his smile, inspired by his kirtan, inspired by his sense of humor, and then go home and be the same person. It doesn't necessarily translate. But that association with the words of the spiritual master is constant. You can have those words anytime. And those words, as Prabhupada said, the words are the life and soul. The words are the instructions. So the instructions are the life and soul. Those instructions are always there. So that's why Prabhupada stressed the instruction. I think it becomes obvious when we have this discussion that Prabhupada did not want his disciples only to be inspired in his association. And there's no guarantee that in the association of the Guru, one necessarily becomes any better. Sometimes we see someone has a lot of association with the guru, but they don't necessarily deeply understand the heart of the guru or don't necessarily serve those desires. There's no guaranteed correlation. And sometimes those who have the association may disobey the guru for whatever reason. So we said in the other class, if you made a correlation between advancement and the amount of time one had with the guru, it wouldn't equate. And sometimes it would be the opposite. Less association, more advancement. More association, less advancement is possible. And so then Prabhupada said, as you know, hopefully you know, if you want to associate with me, read my books. I'm in my books. I live in my books. I will never die. I live in my books. So that was really the emphasis. And if we don't get that, then we really misunderstand what is the spiritual master. And we'll just think the spiritual master is a physical body, right? Which when Prabhupada was fasting, and I don't know for how long, a few months before he died, and he became very, very ill. And devotees, when they would see him, who hadn't seen him for a while, were quite shocked when they saw him. And one time, devotees saw the expression of shock on the face of, Prabhupada saw the expression of shock on the face of some of the disciples who had just come to Vrindavan and saw him in that condition for the first time. And Prabhupada said, now you understand what I've been teaching you, that I'm not this body. So, that was like basic teaching that he was trying to show us. And so obviously he didn't want us to become just attached to his body, because the basis of our philosophy is we're not the body. Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriyakya. When will I make my mind one with the words of the Guru? Not, well, when will I become one with the body? So Prabhupada said, yes, serve the body of the Guru when he's present. And serve the Vani always, and serve the Vani is all you can serve when he's gone. And so this is a very important principle to understand. And just like we can feel separation from Krishna, a pure devotee can feel separation from Krishna, but in the separation, Krishna is more present. So yes, we can feel separation from the Guru, but what you find is in the separation, the Guru is more present because the intensity of the thinking is deeper. The intensity and the amount of remembrance, what's the word I'm looking for? The intensity of the remembrance and the consistency of the remembrance is greater in separation. And that's why it said separation makes the heart grow fonder. Sometimes distance is very helpful for a relationship. Appreciation grows and so forth. And then I mentioned on Monday how some of Srila Prabhupada's servants said that it was difficult for them to have as much reverence for Prabhupada as everyone else had, because they had become too familiar. Familiarity breeds contempt. Not that they were contemptuous, but they had become familiar with Prabhupada. And they both said it was very difficult or impossible to have that mood of reverence that a disciple should have for the Guru, because they had so much association. So then there is also something that is an interesting topic, and I think it's a bit subjective. You will have to process it yourself. But I would title this Enjoying the Spiritual Master. What does enjoying the spiritual master mean? Well, it can mean many things. One thing that Prabhupada said was some of his godbrothers wanted to enjoy the property of a Gaudiya Math. Like, after Guru Maharaj leaves, I will try to obtain this property. So Prabhupada termed that enjoying the property of the spiritual master, which is just another way of saying enjoying the spiritual master. or just enjoying being with the spiritual master, but without that association purifying us, or without that association inspiring more dedication, inspiring a desire to advance, then that could be termed just, I'm just enjoying my guru, I'm just being with my guru. Like you could travel with Prabhupada and do nothing. You just travel, just go to the classes and rest of the day, eat prasadam, hang out, whatever. And some devotees did that for sure. And it's not uncommon. You know, of course, we want to hear from the guru, so we want to be with him. We want to hear from him. But sometimes there were devotees would do that, and there was important service, and Prabhupada said, go do this service, more important. Prabhupada had a personal servant, Harikesh, and he was massaging Prabhupada, and not servant, I think secretary. And he said, you should go out and do service in Eastern Europe. And he didn't want to go. He thought Prabhupada was kicking him out. And he said, Prabhupada said, anybody can rub oil on my body. You know, anybody can massage me. This is not a great service. So Prabhupada is attached to his disciples, but he was sending his disciples everywhere. So he also had some feeling of separation, but the mood was serve the order of the guru. That's the real service. That's when you're closest. And as I said in another class, when your spiritual master leaves, you can't get close any other way. When he's present, you could get close physically. You can get close by coming to classes. But you don't have that option. You can't ask him anything anymore. You can't see him anymore. So you only have, the only option you have is to become close through service and through hearing. And you remember I said in the last class that if we cultivate that when our spiritual master leaves, it will not be, it's difficult always, but it won't be that difficult. But if we don't cultivate that, it'll be very difficult, because that was the main attachment we have, was to the physical form, and that physical form's gone. So become attached to the order, and you'll always be with the spiritual master, and you'll always feel his presence in serving his order. And you know, a lot of times when we are speaking to people, we are repeating what Prabhupada said. So naturally, we feel his presence because we're repeating what he said. Sometimes people would come up to me and say, oh, that was a great lecture. And I would think, well, all I did was repeat Prabhupada, maybe my own words, but basically just paraphrasing what Prabhupada said. So of course, if I do that, it'll be a great lecture, not because it's a great, that I'm a great lecturer, but that Prabhupada is, and I'm repeating it. And so I feel Prabhupada's presence when I'm repeating him. There's a situation, if I can give a solution that Prabhupada would give, that I know he would give or has given, if I can repeat his words, then naturally I feel his presence with me. And as we said in the last class, we should know that he's there, he sees, he knows what's going on. Okay, so let's continue reading. Just closing a few windows here. Okay. These are the concluding words of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is at the end, concluding, obviously, it's at the end of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I think that His Divine Grace, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, is always seeing my activities and guiding me within my heart by his words. As it is said in Srimad Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adi Kavaye. 111. Spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in his Paramatma feature, is always sitting with all his devotees and associates. It is to be admitted that whatever translation work I have done is through the inspiration of my spiritual master, because personally I am most insignificant and incompetent to do this materially impossible work. So what the way Prabhupada is translating inspiration, which is one of the translations, the way he's using the word inspiration, he's using it as guidance, internal guidance. My spiritual master is inspiring me. The word inspire, etymologically, one of the meanings is to fill up, to breathe in. So my spiritual master is breathing into me. He's inspiring me. So by his inspiration, by his empowerment, I'm writing these books. So if that's true, of course it is true, being that it is true, that means when Prabhupada is writing his books, he's feeling and he's getting and feeling the inspiration of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is with him, inspiring him to write in a particular way. So he's fully feeling the presence of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So he's executing the order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is giving his mercy to fulfill that order. So he's feeling help and guidance. And Prabhupada would always say, if you're sincere, you will get guidance. So Guru gives guidance, as we said in the last class. He gives guidance personally and through his books. And when he leaves and you want to ask a question, you can't. So he'll give that guidance from within or within a dream. So that is a definition of inspiration. When I say so-and-so is inspiring me, another meaning is he's speaking to me from within or empowering me. I mean, we don't always use the word that way. We use it more like that so-and-so is motivating me. But it also means guiding from within. And so we'll see that when we read the rest of this purport. I do not think myself a learned scholar, but I have full faith in the service of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. If there is any credit to my activities of translating, it is all due to His Divine Grace. Certainly, if His Divine Grace were physically present at this time, it would have been a great occasion for jubilation. But even though He is not physically present, I'm confident that He is very much pleased by this work of translation. He was very fond of seeing many books published to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. Therefore, our society, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been formed to execute the order of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and His Divine Grace, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So Prabhupada's saying, I know my spiritual master is pleased because I'm doing something that was very dear to him. So we would like our spiritual master to know what we're doing so he could say, Jayadev, I'm pleased with you. Chaitanya Dasi, I'm pleased with you. Aneta, I'm pleased with you. Kavita, I'm pleased with you. Sydney, Anuradha, Fran, Asta Sakti, Gaurapriya, like we all want to know that we're pleasing our spiritual master. So now here Prabhupada is giving us a clue of how do you know that if the spiritual master is not there, or even if he is there, but he's not going to tell every disciple every day, oh, whatever you're doing is pleasing me. Sometimes he's pleased, he doesn't say anything. Sometimes it's a good sign. Think, oh, my Guru Maharaj didn't say anything. Oh, he could have said something bad. He said nothing. You're okay. You can think like that, right? Because if he wasn't pleased, he would tell you. So he said, well, he never tells me he's pleased. Just accept silence means yes. Because if he wasn't, you would hear about it. So, but Prabhupada is giving us insight into how to know the spiritual master is pleased. And it's quite simple what he's saying. He's saying, I know this book distribution writing and distribution of books was very dear to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. So I know he would be pleased by this. There's like no question. This is what he wanted, right? So there's so many things Prabhupada has asked us to do, or our spiritual master has told us to do. And we don't have to wonder if he is pleased by that, because if we just do it and we know this is what he wants us to do, we know this is pleasing to him. He said it, he's told us, he's told everybody, he's told me. Then if we do it, we should just be satisfied. I know, and we can say the same thing that Prabhupada said is, I know he is pleased, right? You don't have to, like, he's not even here on the planet, but I know he's pleased because this is what he had asked. So that's important. How do I know he's pleased? Now, if you have a guilty conscience, you may think, oh, nothing I can do can please him. But Prabhupada is saying it's not like that. If the spiritual master said, oh, open a restaurant, distribute prasadam distribution is very important, and you do it, then to say I don't know he's pleased would be wrong, or would be doubting him, because he said he was. So how could we doubt that? Right? So that might be that I just have a guilty conscience, or I feel I can't do anything right. But that's our own emotions are not reality necessarily. Sometimes we think how we feel is how the world is. But better than feeling, allowing us to think that the world is the way I feel, let's look at the world according to what our spiritual master has said. That's better, right? So it's not like, I don't know if this is going to please him or not. Yes, you do know. He said it would. So why are you doubting? It doesn't make sense to doubt when he's given direct instruction. So Prabhupada is saying the same thing. I know he would be pleased by this. And it's not, then you might say, well, isn't that pride? I know I'm pleasing my spiritual master. I'm so great, Everybody applaud for me. No, it's not like that. It is a indication that the disciple wants to please his spiritual master. And if the spiritual master is happy, the disciple is happy. So Prabhupada is celebrating. He says it's a cause of jubilation. I know Srila Bhaktisiddhanta would be happy. If we can make him happy, then it's a great cause for jubilation. Not like, I made him happy, I'm number one. It's not like that at all. Okay, let's go back. Next paragraph. Although according to material vision, His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada passed away from this material world on the last day of December 1936. I still consider His Divine Grace to be always present with me by His Vani, His words. I think that His Divine Grace is always seeing my activities and guiding me within the heart by His words. Spiritual inspiration comes from within the heart, wherein the Supreme Personality of Godhead in His Paramatma feature is always sitting with all His devotees and associates. The service of the spiritual master is essential. If there is no chance to serve the spiritual master directly, a devotee should serve him by remembering his instructions. Remembering the instructions means executing, not just remembering and doing nothing. There's no difference between the spiritual master's instructions and the spiritual master himself. In his absence, therefore, his words of direction should be the pride of the devotee. So, pride, you could say also wealth. This is my greatest wealth is the instruction of my spiritual master. And Prabhupada saying in his absence, Prabhupada is speaking personally because Srila Bhaktisiddhanta was not present when Prabhupada wrote this. So, my great pride, my great jubilation, my great treasure is the instructions of my guru, that I can fulfill those instructions, and I can, as Prabhupada says, he lives forever and his disciples live with him through it forever, live with him through his instructions. So that's the great pride of the disciple, the great jewel of the disciple is the instruction of the guru, by which they can live forever together. That's really the essence. Everything else we say is just going to be icing on the cake. And here's the quote that I just gave. He lives forever by his divine instructions, and the followers live with him. Prabhupada was asked what to tell devotees who felt they needed more personal association. Quote, first ask them if they are chanting their rounds. In other words, if you aren't even following instructions, why request personal association? Or if you are following, you may not feel the need for that association. This question that came up to Prabhupada came up in the last days. And Prabhupada was saying, why are you so concerned about me leaving? And they said, because we can't. This is for many reasons. And one of the reasons, obvious reasons, we need your association. But the other reason was we can't ask you any questions. No. This was different. This was a different one. Because the context was Prabhupada had maybe 5,000 disciples and traveling extensively, not staying anywhere very long. And the question was, how can your disciples have a personal association with you when there's not personal interaction? And Prabhupada asked the devotee, he said, well, what did you tell them? And the devotee said, well, I tell them, through service. Everything that we're talking about in these classes, that's what the devotee said. And so Prabhupada heard that. And then Prabhupada's reply was, ask them if they're chanting their rounds. In other words, I've given you a method to follow. And Prabhupada knew a lot of devotees weren't chanting their rounds, so that's why he chose that. He could have said anything. Ask them if they're following the principles. Ask them if they're following my instruction. But that's the principal instruction. Prabhupada knew not everyone was chanting. So Prabhupada saying, I find this question a bit ridiculous, we could say. What's the word? Funny. This question is a bit funny or improper, even ridiculous. How can we get your association? You're asking how to get my association, and you may not even be following my instruction, my most important instruction, and you're asking how to get association. I just give you $1 million and somehow you lost it, spilled on the ground somewhere, and you're asking me how to can I become a millionaire? It's like, don't ask. Go find the $1 million you just dropped. Something like that. Does that make sense? Yeah, so that's just another way of saying what we've been saying, but I think it's a powerful way of saying it, isn't it? Yes? Da? Okay. So I have the next thing are my comments. So I'll read this and perhaps discuss it. I think we've discussed it already, but it doesn't hurt to discuss something again because we don't always get everything the first time we hear. Disappearance is only factually possible if our spiritual master's instruction and service disappears from our lives. Otherwise, as Prabhupada said, I will never die. I will live forever in my books. If our guru remains in our hearts, then he is with us always. He may have left our external vision, but as he leaves, he enters our heart. At least hopefully, that's what happens. The spiritual master lives forever, and the disciple who follows his instructions lives with him. That was that quote above. That was actually a paraphrase. So I'm going to take the quotes off. So the disappearance of the guru is only a disappearance to our external vision. He will continue to guide the sincere disciple from within the heart. So I think what's important to meditate on is this idea, the idea that the guru doesn't disappear. He disappears from external vision. And as he disappears from external vision, he enters our heart. So the disappearance day of the guru is also the appearance day of the guru in our heart in a deeper way. At least that's what it should be, right? The disappearance day of my guru is the day he appeared fully in my heart. You got to get more light here. Yeah, so I think that's important. So when the spiritual, like even when the spiritual master is not leaving this world, he's just leaving the city you're in onto an airplane. He's going through security at the airport. And while he's going through security, in theory, he's also entering your heart. At least that's the way it should be, right? Hopefully, right? So practice now. So when he goes through this Vaikuntha security gate, you've practiced keeping him in your heart. So when he finally takes the plane back to Vaikuntha, you'll be practiced. You'll just do the same thing, right? And, everything in this world is practice. So how well you practice is how well you succeed, right? You ever do something and you're not doing it well, and you're thinking, I should have practiced more, but it's like too late now. You're being tested, or it's a game or something, and you're thinking, I should have practiced more. I should have prepared more. Yeah. Occasionally I've given a class or a workshop, not often, but where at the end I think I should have prepared more, but it was too late. Yeah, there were things I wanted to say, but I didn't have the references, or it wasn't as organized as I like it. Then I regret. So sadhana is this, the word sadhana means practice. So we're practicing how to act in pure devotional service. When you practice to act that way, then when things are difficult, you're so well practiced, then you can do it. Just like in sports or in war, you don't know what to expect. So you practice expecting anything. And if you're practiced enough, you're pretty much ready for anything. In life, will throw all kinds of crazy things at you, won't it? Yeah. So, sometimes a devotee goes through difficulty. And although this sounds cruel or maybe strange, I think it's good they're going through difficulty, because it's going to make them stronger. And they need this. Because if they're going to grow and be able to deal with life, they need to go through some difficulties and win. Go through it, learn, become stronger. Because, leaving the body is not going to be easy. I think most of what we go through is easier than leaving the body. So if we're not even good at going through difficulties here, what about at the end? Or growing old, it's not easy. If you practice tolerance throughout your life, then when you grow old, you'll be able to deal with all the physical problems you have, or whatever problems the world throws at you. So it's important. And I think, some devotees, they melt when the guru goes, because they didn't develop enough of the internal strength. So, you can practice now, and then when your guru leaves, you'll be okay. You won't really feel that he's left. I remember when Srila Prabhupada left, that at that moment when he left, everyone was feeling more determined to be and spread Krishna consciousness than ever before. We knew he was going to leave. We had months and months of preparation. I mean, the back of our mind, we couldn't accept it, but materially speaking, we knew it was inevitable, and it was inevitably coming soon. The back of our minds, we believed in mystic power. That Prabhupada could control his whole body and do whatever he wanted. But that might be true, but he didn't. And the devotees were so upset that Prabhupada was leaving. And Prabhupada said, my body is finished. I can't do any service. I don't want to stay. I can't do service. If you ever, it's just a side point here, but I'm sure you must have wondered, why did Prabhupada leave? Why didn't he stay? And at least what it appears is that the body was falling apart, and he said that it was natural that it would, and that Prabhupada's greatest pain, you could say, would be to exist in a body in which he couldn't serve Krishna. And not only that, but Prabhupada was somewhat anxious that he couldn't serve the devotees, that they were just serving him, like doing everything. He didn't like that. He was always the one who was serving us the most. He didn't like that he was being served. One devotee had to clean up Prabhupada's stool. And Prabhupada was saying, like, how can you do this? This must be horrible. Like Prabhupada was feeling embarrassed and awkward that this devotee had to do that, and feeling awkward that he couldn't take care of himself and he couldn't do any service. So that was the mood, like, okay, I can't do anything. Why should I stay in this body? So Prabhupada accepted the body is falling apart. There's nothing that can be done. He gave up his will to live. There was no reason. We thought somewhere in the back of our mind something mystical would happen, but we knew the day was coming soon. And when it did come, we felt this huge burden of responsibility. Now that he's gone, I have to step up to the plate, so to speak. There's a huge absence in the world. There's a huge absence in our movement. We now have to try to step up. Like, none of us could replace Prabhupada. Not all of us together could replace him, but we could do better. So that was the mood. So that's a nice mood. When the spiritual master goes, he's leaving room for you to do more service that he did now. It's not being done. Who will do it? So it's an opportunity. He was teaching, he was doing this, or whatever it was he was doing. Which one of us can take up that service now? What can we do? So that's how we felt. So that way, Prabhupada didn't leave, but he went into our heart. And within our heart, we found more determination. So that's how we should feel. Okay. This is a description of Prabhupada's last days. This is, I think this is from a Vyas Puja offering. Quote, one who has done service to the Lord lives forever. You have been taught to serve Krishna, and with Krishna will live eternally. Our life is eternal. Nahanyate hanyamani sharire. The disappearance of this temporary body doesn't matter. This is Prabhupada speaking. The body is meant for disappearance. So live forever by serving Krishna. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, so that's it. Let me read it again. That's Prabhupada speaking. One who has done service to the Lord lives forever. You have been taught to serve Krishna. And with Krishna, we'll live eternally. Our life is eternal. Nahanyate hanyamani sharire. The disappearance of this temporary body doesn't matter. The body is meant for disappearance. So live forever by serving Krishna. Thank you very much. So Prabhupada's saying, the body's not going to stay. That's not surprising. He used to say, but this is not surprising. The body, we're all surprised, but it's not surprising. So Prabhupada goes on to say, there are two things, life and death. So if I die, where's the wrong in that? If I die, that is natural. So Prabhupada was trying to pacify the devotees and saying that, you're all lamenting, but death is natural. And that he's saying, if I die, there's nothing wrong, because Prabhupada said, when you die, something's wrong if you're young, but not if you're old, because if you're old, you're supposed to die. That's natural. He said, something's wrong if you die when you're young. So when someone dies when they're young, for us, it's a tragedy. And just the other day, a devotee's mother died, and everybody was sending condolences. And she said, well, she was 97. So like, oh, okay, that's like, oh, she was 97 and she died. I was like, that's good. Because, if you live over 80 or something, that's good, right? She lived a long time. So even though she died, we could say, well, that was good. She lived a long time. So Prabhupada's saying, there's nothing to lament. This is natural. When you're old, this is what happens. When you're young, yeah, that's different. Then it's unnatural. So here's a poem. And I don't know who wrote the poem, but I found it in Vyas Puja book. And it was written, there it is. Prabhupada Das. I think it's devotees from South America. It was translated from Spanish as far as I remember. A tribute to Srila Prabhupada. Where are you now, Savior of the universe? Like a celestial swan, you have taken flight, closing your pastimes, leaving us to the shelter of your example. You have gone, and yet you remain, for your voice vibrating in the wind will continue cutting the knots of illusion and attachment. You have gone, and yet you remain, for your compassion continues to melt the stone and still like hearts filling the world with love of God, pouring forth sublime knowledge. Now I understand that life doesn't end when the skin ends. You made me see that the body is temporary, but I am eternal. By your grace, I now know that I am not the owner of what I thought myself to be, and that the illusion of pleasure glides through my fingers without satisfying my desires. By your grace, I can see that the creation has a master, and that I am his servitor and his friend as well. Where are you now? I know you are there with Radha and Krishna in their kingdom. I know you are here in your words of roses and fire. Wow. In your words of roses and fire, thunderbolt and a rose. I can't bear to think you are no longer here. But when I do, I feel your hand upon me and your voice guiding me, as in the night the moon lights the wanderer's way. Where are you now? I ask myself at every instant, and in relief my mind responds. For him who serves you, you will always be here. Papanandasa. Wow. Amazing. Huh? You may want to copy that poem just to solace you in separation. It's a poem to solace our separation. Hare Krishna. For him who serves you, you will always be here. And your words are like your hand upon me, guiding me. So this is an interview with Tamal Krishna Maharaj, this next quote about Prabhupada's disappearance. Yes, by the Acharya's presence, he brings order to the chaos. And who's to say that Srila Prabhupada is not still present? We do not feel that Srila Prabhupada has died. If we felt that way, we could not bear to live. We regret the loss of his physical presence, but we are consoled by his eternal presence in the form of his instructions. And therefore, we are very hopeful that the order he has established will continue to exist for thousands of years to come. These interviews are right after Prabhupada left. There was an issue back to Godhead about Prabhupada's disappearance right after he left, or shortly after. Giriraj Swami, I do not think that separation from Srila Prabhupada is possible at any moment, provided we want to keep his association. He is ready and waiting. Anytime we turn to him, he is there to guide us and help us in any way. Mainly, he is there to give us instructions and service and to chastise us if we disobey, but we should never go away. So, same points are being made, as I said before, that whatever I said is just going to be underscored in everything else we read. But Giriraj Swami's point is, Tamal Krishnada's point is that, well, what's the proof that Prabhupada is here? And he said, well, if that were not true, then we wouldn't be able to live. We would be very depressed, very discouraged, very morose. But, and I'm sure you've experienced this, that it's a very awkward experience to celebrate Prabhupada's disappearance, because it's a celebration. And you would think, why would you celebrate the disappearance of someone? In fact, we are not celebrating the disappearance. We are celebrating the activities of the spiritual master on his disappearance day. And the logic of that is, at least the way the logic has been taught, which does make sense. If you celebrate the birthday of the person, that's the day they're born. And so theoretically speaking, the day they're born, they haven't done anything yet. When you celebrate their disappearance, because it's the end of their life, that now you can celebrate their life's activities. So now we celebrate Prabhupada's life on his disappearance day. We glorify him. Of course, we do that on his appearance day, but technically speaking, at least traditionally, it was done more so on the disappearance day. So now on the disappearance day, we're celebrating his activities. And by celebrating his activities, we're feeling inspired, we're feeling blissful, which is kind of contradiction, isn't it? Because it's, in one sense, it's a very miserable time. But the point is that he's present. And if he actually were not present, we would not be able to continue, neither would we feel that deep connection and bliss by remembering him. So as we know, Krishna consciousness is absolute. Remembering that person is the same as being with them. Yeah. Nagiraj Swami says, Prabhupada's there mainly to guide us, but also to chastise us. So then you might say, well, how can the spiritual master chastise you if he's gone? Well, sometimes it happens through other devotees, and you recognize that was my guru chastising me. So you can say he arranged to chastise you. So that many, many devotees feel that way. That something would happen and they would feel, oh, that was Srila Prabhupada chastising me through this person or through this group of devotees. Okay. So we just have a little bit more to read, and I will have another document for the next class. And then we'll take questions and comments. So this is from this disappearance issue of BTG. All over the world, Srila Prabhupada's disciples felt profound shock and grief when they heard of his passing. For them, the most beloved person in the universe, the dearmost teacher and friend, the very source of spiritual life and knowledge, was gone now. Many wept for hours, and others wondered how the Krishna consciousness movement could go on without its powerful founder and guide. As the days passed, devotees sought solace in the timeless philosophy Srila Prabhupada had preached so untiringly, buoyed by his philosophical understanding, and consoled by many sincere friends and well-wishers. Devotees resolved to work together even more vigorously to spread the teachings of their beloved preceptors. Yeah, that was the point I made, that there is kind of a renewed energy. Now we have to grow up. Spiritual master is gone. We now have to become mature devotees. So this last section is entitled How to Feel When the Guru Leaves. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam 4:28-47, purport. Figuratively, the queen is supposed to be the disciple of the king. Thus, when the mortal body of the spiritual master expires, his disciples should cry exactly as the queen cries when the king leaves his body. However, the disciple and spiritual master are never separated because the spiritual master always keeps company with the disciple as long as the disciple follows strictly the instructions of the spiritual master. This is called the association of Vani, words. Physical presence is called Vapu. As long as the spiritual master is physically present, the disciples should serve the physical body of the spiritual master. And when the spiritual master is no longer physically existing, the disciples should serve the instructions of the spiritual master. Okay, so I have to go back through all those quotes and see if there are any questions or comments. None? So now is your time to ask questions or make comments. And you can type them or speak them. Anything you liked, you can copy before the end of class. Or I guess we could send you the whole document.
Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Hi, Paul. Thank you very much. I copied everything because it was so special, instructions. And I realized that meditating about the disappearance of the spiritual master, it forces me to so much personal growth. And I can see that how much I'm trapped in bodily consciousness. And I can also realize that there is definitely guilty conscience, which makes me insecure. And that also I'm dealing with fear. I'm really dealing with fear of separation, fear of being left alone, maybe. Yeah. It's like it's like an intense growth process. And actually don't have a specific question left from this. I think I have to work on that. Yeah.
You know, one thing I was thinking, that a standard way in which someone learns to perfect something or improve something or deal with something is to get guidance from people who've already dealt with it. So that will help, not only Prabhupada disciples, but disciples of gurus who have left, and what they went through and how they dealt with it and what their realizations are. That could be hugely helpful for you, because they've done the heavy lifting already. So rather than take 10 years to figure it out, it took me like 8 years to figure it out, to be able to deal with it. So rather than take 8 years to deal with it, you could learn. I think the biggest realization I had was coming to grips with going from the personal association to only the Vani association, and getting to the point of accepting and experiencing that is non-different. It was like a resistance in the beginning. No, it's not non-different. It's different. But that resistance made it difficult to experience that it's not different. And so, like I was saying, but at a certain point, if you want that association, that's the only way you can get it is by executing the order. And you actually execute the order, you feel shelter within that. And so you won't feel like an abandoned, orphaned son or daughter, but you'll realize that there's shelter in the instructions. It's like when we read Prabhupada's books, devotees say, oh, I'm reading it and I'm getting new insights. And like Prabhupada said, everything I wanted to say, I put in my books. So the more we study the words of the Guru, the more we realized, oh, there was so much there I didn't realize that he actually had taught everything that I'm going to be dealing with, even how to go through separation. He taught it all. So he never really did abandon me. The abandon, sometimes you can feel abandoned by a person who's not abandoning you, just because you need the affection shown in a certain way. And obviously, if the guru's not there, it can't be shown personally. So then you realize that if you want to get that affection, or like Prabhupada said, this was a great cause for jubilation, you have to do something that was dear to him. And then once you do it, you'll feel, oh, he's happy. And then you'll feel like, well, this is strange. I'm feeling that he's happy. And he's not even here. So that means, well, he must be. This is just a different way of connecting. I'm not used to connecting entirely this way. And the sooner you can learn how to connect that way, the easier it will be. And the longer it takes to learn to connect that way, the more you'll feel the sadness of separation, not the ecstasy of separation. So you'll experience separation, but whether it'll be sad or ecstatic, that's another thing. Is that okay? Or you want to say more? Okay, thank you. So Kavita said, should we read the edited books of Srila Prabhupada or not? I read either one, whatever you think. Apparently the BBT is printing both, the edited, they're all edited. It's just some are more edited than others. And some devotees feel that the edits were not what Prabhupada wanted. And if you feel uneasy about someone editing after Prabhupada left, you can read the older ones. I don't really think it's a principle that's being discussed, and the BBT is going through all those edits now. I don't think you won't go back to Godhead by reading one or the other. but it's it depends on you. If you feel like a lot of us, we were raised on Prabhupada's unedited books, so it's like I don't want to read those other ones because that's not, those aren't the books I grew up reading. So that's one issue. Other people feel it's not proper after Prabhupada left to edit, and other people feel changes. Some changes are good, some changes are not. Some changes could adjust the meeting slightly. So, it's like anything, it can become a really big issue or not a big issue. It depends. For some people, it's a very big issue. They feel that it's it's an offense to Prabhupada. Other people feel it's a necessary evil to clarify some things. And most people are somewhere in the middle. That yes, some things need to be adjusted, typos corrected, or some blatant English grammar being not properly used. So Krishna Karshini says, controversial question. Can't imagine Krishna Karshini would ask a controversial question. Oh, before we go to you, we have one from Anuradha. To accomplish your Vani is the highest form of life we can have. It's not easy. Yeah, it's not. But that's good. It's not easy. Then you spend your whole life trying to do it instead of sleeping. So that's the idea. Okay. Here's the controversial question. Is it okay to pray to Prabhupada to help us in relationship with our Guru? Is we have some personal issues in relationship with our Guru when we're close to him? In other words, you're saying, would it be offensive to pray to Prabhupada to say, I have issues with my Guru? That's an interesting question. It could be. Well, I can say this, that sometimes devotees would complain about another devotee, God brother. And Prabhupada really liked that devotee. There's many stories like that where Prabhupada really liked and appreciated a devotee, and people are complaining about him. He did not appreciate it at all. But if you want to pray to Prabhupada to have a closer, better, more deeper understanding relationship with your Guru, that's fine. But to say, it's really a problem. My Guru is messed up because he does this and that. I don't think Prabhupada would I don't know if he'd come out alive after that. Why the need to edit the books? Because English wasn't Prabhupada's first language. And so he needed people to bring the language up to the proper standards academically. So intellectuals would appreciate the book. Kamal's question. You said Prabhupada is not restricted to three-dimensional world. Does this mean Prabhupada is in higher dimension world, fourth or fifth? He can appear and exit three-dimensional worlds at will. He can do whatever he wants. Yeah. He can, yeah. I had a story yesterday. A devotee was really sick and she was going to this doctor, that doctor, fasting, this and that. And Prabhupada touched her head and for I don't know how long, and she got better. So Prabhupada was reluctant to show this kind of stuff. Prabhupada wanted to get his book published by Macmillan. He wanted to get his book published by a publishing company, and the devotees tried and they couldn't do it. And so there was a person, they had made an album, and a person from Macmillan wanted to buy the album, and Prabhupada said, just go over there and maybe you can meet someone who could publish the book. And Brahmananda was thinking, well, it's not going to happen. And Prabhupada said, just go, just see. It's awkward. He's going to see an accountant, and like that. Sometimes you're told to do something that's you think is very outlandish and embarrassing, and people think you're crazy for asking. It seemed it was something like that. But he said, Prabhupada just said, "Oh, just do it." And you've probably heard the story, but it just happened by Krishna's arrangements. They were actually looking for a Gita. And then Brahmananda said when he came back and he told Prabhupada, we got a contract with the Gita, with Macmillan. Prabhupada was like saying, Prabhupada, I just brought you an apple. It was like that. It was like, he said, like Prabhupada knew it, like he already knew. So I wouldn't limit what Prabhupada could do. We have many stories of him appearing to speak to devotees or protect devotees. So we can always pray. Okay. We've set a new record here for ending class early. Okay, now you can all go to sleep. As Prabhupada's joke was like, what will you do when you have free time? Simply sleep. Hare Krishna. There's one more set of quotes that I will go over and hopefully do class next week. I will be in California, which means that it'll be 6:30 my time. So if all goes well, I'll be able to do classes then. And then we can do one more set. But Jaidev, you had another set of questions that related to the Guru, but not to disappearance, right? You want to ask those questions? You remember those questions?
Yeah, it's a whole, as I said in the beginning, it's a whole process. And for example, you also addressed this in other classes, dealing with opposite emotions, for example, acting as a mature disciple and realizing the own neediness on the other side. And, yeah, I'm working through the playlist of balances in on SoundCloud right now.
Yeah. Well,
so
yeah. Well, it's a general principle is if we have expectations, which are maybe not common expectations. Some expectations are common, like we advertise classes at 9:30. You expect class is going to be at 9:30. That's the common expectation, right? I tell you I'm coming to Germany on this date. You expect I'm coming. That's not, there's nothing crazy about that. But some expectations are specific to our own needs. And where it becomes a problem is where those needs are excessive or unhealthy, then the expectation is unhealthy. And it creates an unhealthy dynamic in the relationship. So there can be resentment connected to an expectation, which is connected to a need. And that need that I have is because I'm not in a healthy state internally, for example. Or I'm weak in some way. And so I have a need for someone to maybe do things for me that I should be doing for myself. Or I have a need for someone to fix me where I should be fixing myself. So that's where problems are created. So whenever we have a need, especially a need which seems to not be healthy or seems to be creating a problem in a relationship, whether it's with a guru or a wife or a friend, we should think, okay, well, what is that need? And is that need unhealthy? And can I fulfill that need in a healthy way? Because sometimes if I'm expecting another person to fulfill a need that I could fulfill, then it creates a very awkward relationship and a dependency that's unhealthy. And it puts pressure on another person to be something that they really weren't meant to be or created to be, or not. It's not part of a normal relationship. So you get a lot of that in guru-disciple relationships where they have a need and they're expecting the guru to fulfill a need, which is not part necessarily of his job description. Although it might be that some gurus, due to their nature, can fulfill that need better than others. But if that guru cannot fulfill that need, then he can't fulfill that need. Now, if it's a normal need, that's different. If it's not a problem on your part, then yeah, you might be disappointed. But we're talking about needs which are created out of our own specific problems that we have. Then it becomes a problem for the relationship, and you don't want problems in your relationship with your guru. It's not ideal, at least. And then you get other things also. You let's say you have a guilty conscience. Then whenever you do for your guru, you'll always feel guilty that I'm doing nothing. And your guru may be thinking, wow, you're doing, what you're doing is so helpful. I know I have experience like that some disciples they're doing things which are like really helpful to me. They don't really know how helpful it is, but they're the only ones doing it. And if they didn't do it, it would be a headache for me. And they do it quite regularly, and they do it well, and they do it steadily. But for them, it's not like a big deal. So even that disciple might think, oh, I'm doing nothing for my guru. I feel so guilty. I'm useless like that. It's not at all how he feels. So that's not good, because, if you have that mood, it doesn't matter what you do, you'll always feel like that. And so you kind of be disempowered. You'll disempower yourself. It's like endless guilt. There's nothing you can do to solve it. You make the whole world Krishna conscious. Yeah, I made this planet Krishna conscious, but there's so many planets in the universe that I didn't. So I feel really guilty because I know my Guru Maharaj would want the whole universe. And I don't know if I saved all the insects. I'm not sure. They're going back to Godhead. So I feel guilty because I know he would want that also. So, yeah. And I think it's also important to realize that it's not that we shouldn't feel guilty if we do something wrong. But the problem is feeling guilty when we didn't. If you did something wrong, you don't feel guilty. That's something wrong with that. Right? But if you really didn't do anything wrong and you feel guilty, then there's probably something wrong with that. I mean, that meaning you. Right? And then Guru Maharaj, I feel so guilty, and he's thinking, why are you feeling guilty? Why are you ruining my day with your guilt? There's nothing to feel guilty about. Right? You imagine a guru, and every disciple feels guilty. He's created a whole community of guilt-ridden people. That certainly wouldn't make him happy. Wouldn't make anybody happy. So that was not Prabhupada's intention. So, yeah. There's two people in every relationship, so we both contribute to it. And our own issues. I think we talked about in another class about maybe father issues, where maybe you didn't have a father that was present, or he died young, and then you want the guru to represent the father. I always felt like I never had a father who could enlighten me. So when I met Prabhupada, it was like, oh, here's the father that can enlighten me. But fortunately, that was the natural role of a spiritual father. So it was like, oh, now I have a real father that I wasn't missing a material father, so I didn't need Prabhupada to be a material father. I was just missing the spiritual side. And so now I had a spiritual father. So that's healthy. That's good. You want that. But if you want him to replace a material father and fulfill the needs that a father would fulfill, then you could run into trouble. I'm not saying you would always run into trouble, but you might. If you're not, you have to just be realistic about what that relationship is. And it's, in some ways, I think Prabhupada was a father to a lot of disciples, especially in the early days, because it was so small. So it was like a family, he was the father. So that's understandable. But again, if our own unhealthy needs creep up in the relationship, it could cause a problem. Right? Okay, now we're getting all the questions when it's time to end. Okay. Melody. Why do we have such a tendency to avoid taking responsibility for ourselves? I think that's a question you might have to answer, because it could be different for different people. But one thing that we find is feeling like I can't do it. Someone has to do it for me, or taking responsibility is difficult. It's going to make me unhappy. It's going to make me miserable. Like that. And also, it's always easier to blame. If you're not successful, it's easier to blame others, because then you don't feel guilty. So if you take responsibility, guess who you have to blame? Yourself. And that may not be fun. And for some of us, that may be very depressing. We're not actually able to do that, because if you have low self-esteem, it's hard to admit that you're making mistakes or doing something wrong. And you'd rather just say, I'm okay, but the other people are the problem. Then you don't have to feel bad about yourself. So those are some of the reasons. Sometimes we're just lazy. Sometimes we think everyone else should solve the problem. Sometimes we think the problem will just go away. Sometimes we think there's nothing we can do. There's like so many reasons. You really have to ask yourself personally why you think you do it. But I know for a lot of, I don't know about women, but I know for a lot of men, there's this belief that if responsibility is a synonym for misery, unhappiness, and being just irresponsible. I can have any woman, go anywhere whenever I want, just work a job, get some money, go travel. That's happiness. Pick up, go, move around. If I'm responsible, then I'm stuck. Take care of this woman, take care of this child, have a job. So the responsibility equates to pain. Why is Krishna consciousness so difficult? Why can't we just chant and dance? Why do I have to get up early, do all these things? There's a laziness there also. There's I want to be free, so-called. So responsibility means I'm not free. So Ajinkya says, we learned that Sukadeva Goswami was fully situated in Brahman before he was born and got attracted to Bhagavatam. Then he took birth. At the same time, we hear that he was Radharani's parent. Communication between. This means he must have been situated in Bhagavan realization when he was the Sukha. Basically, how is it that the Sukha, so dear to her, became a practitioner of the Brahman realization, or is it just a Leela enacted by Sukadeva Goswami to glorify devotion, becoming the son of Srila Vyasadeva? Or you could say, or was it one Leela, he was, came out in Brahman, in a way that even the Brahman knowers are attracted. Bhagavan realization, because Srila Sukadeva Goswami is mentioned as the eternal associate of the Lord at some places. Then the beginning verses of Bhagavatam say The very fact that the Bhagavatam was spoken by Sukadeva Goswami, it has become more sweet. How is it that such a special personality was called Brahmarat, the knower of Brahman? Well, there's no time to answer that question. We'll save that question, Ajinkya, for next week. Okay. And Ajinkya, why don't you look up the answer to that? I think there could be more than one answer. That you gave the answer there. It's to show, Krishna wanted to show how Brahman is preliminary and a Brahman realized person can become attracted to Krishna. But you can double check if that answer is correct. We see these things happening in the Bhagavatam, ordinary people becoming extraordinary to show that an example for all of us, ordinary people. Okay, we can end here. You can all begin chanting, I am